The sky has softened. Maybe the sun has dipped just past the horizon where you are, or perhaps night has already folded across your world like a blanket. Somewhere, a curtain is being drawn. A pillow is finding the shape of a familiar cheek. And here, with a quiet voice and a gentle story, we begin to let go of the day. This is your space to drift inward into the still, glowing edge of sleep. Tonight, we're going to wander into the curious world of lucid dreams, not in a rush, not to solve any mysteries, but simply to drift beside the questions. What does it mean to realize you're dreaming? And if you know you're in a dream, can you take control of it? As if you were playing inside a game, bending the rules, flying above rooftops, changing the scene with a thought. That's the thread we'll follow, lightly, slowly, layer by layer. Before we go deeper, I'd love to know where you are tonight. Just whisper it in the comments, your city or country, and what time it is where you are as you're listening. It's comforting to think of all the little lights across the world, of all of us stretched out, nestled into our own corners of the dark. Together, we make a constellation of good nights, a quiet universe of listeners falling asleep under the same stars. Have you ever had a dream that felt just a little too vivid? Maybe you were flying or walking through a place you've never seen before, but it all felt oddly real. You looked around and thought, wait, this doesn't make sense. Maybe you suddenly realized this must be a dream. And in that moment, something clicked. You were awake inside your sleep. That sensation, the realization that you're dreaming while still dreaming, is what we call a lucid dream. It's not something invented in science fiction or pulled from spiritual texts, although it appears in both. It's a documented, measurable phenomenon experienced by countless people from all walks of life. Some find it by accident, others learn to summon it. But either way, it always begins with that quiet little spark, awareness. But how does awareness sneak into a place where the rules of logic, space, and even memory are often unraveled? A dream is usually a foggy stream of images, a dance of disconnected fragments. Yet in a lucid dream, a light turns on. It's not like waking up, but more like becoming a director in the middle of a play you didn't know you were performing in. You're still in costume. The stage is still shifting, but now you see the curtain. What makes that shift happen? The scientific story begins with sleep itself, particularly REM sleep, which stands for rapid eye movement. During this phase, our brain becomes strangely active. While the body lies still, the mind becomes a theater of images, sensations, and half-formed stories. The muscles are paralyzed to keep us from acting out our dreams, but inside the brain, something astonishing is happening. In REM, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain linked with reasoning, self-awareness, and decision-making, is typically quiet. That's why regular dreams often feel chaotic or illogical. But in lucid dreams, this part of the brain flickers on again, like a lighthouse in fog. Suddenly, we gain a measure of insight. We recognize this is not real, and yet somehow it still feels real enough to explore. What's fascinating is that this moment of lucidity doesn't always break the dream. We don't always wake up. Sometimes that realization is the beginning of a new layer. From that point, we might start to steer, just a little at first. Maybe we decide to open a different door. Maybe we try to fly. Maybe we just observe more clearly, feeling amazed that we're still asleep, yet in control. Control, though, is a strange word in this space. What does it mean to control a dream? Is it like programming a game, commanding your mind like a console? Or is it more like riding a current, knowing you can steer a little, but not rewrite the sea? Even the most experienced lucid dreamers report that some things resist their will. The dream has its own texture, its own logic, and sometimes that logic doesn't bend, even when we ask nicely. Still, the idea of being able to consciously explore our dreams is compelling. It's as if our minds contain a secret playground that we normally stumble through half blind. But with lucidity, we might walk through those gates with our eyes open. And once you know that gate exists, can you learn how to return? There are methods, techniques, rituals practiced by lucid dreamers all over the world, some ancient, some modern. But even without them, many people have experienced a spontaneous lucid dream at least once, often in childhood, when the boundary between waking and dreaming is thinner. A flying dream, a nightmare reversed by sheer will, a moment when you spoke to a dream character and thought, "This can't be right." Is it possible that our minds have always known how to do this, that we've simply forgotten? Maybe that's part of the story, not learning something new, but remembering something old. A hidden capability that emerges in just the right balance of stillness, imagination, and awareness. Like a moon only visible at a certain angle, or a melody heard only when the room is silent. So tonight, as your body settles and your breath deepens, ask yourself quietly, have I ever known I was dreaming right in the middle of the dream? And if not yet, what would I do if I did? Then perhaps the next question gently forms. Can you train yourself to reach that threshold more often? Can you increase the chances of that one flicker of awareness blooming into full recognition while asleep? It might sound fantastical at first, but for many people, lucid dreaming isn't just an accident. It's a skill. Like balancing on a bicycle, like learning to whistle, it's delicate and slippery at first. But with the right rhythm, it begins to happen more often. And gradually, it feels less like a surprise and more like a quiet doorway that appears when you know how to look. One of the simplest techniques begins with noticing your reality during the day. This is called a reality check. You ask yourself, often at random moments, am I dreaming? It sounds strange to question your waking world, but there's a method to this little madness. If you get into the habit of checking during the day, that habit can sneak into your dreams, and one day you'll ask the same question in a dream and realize, yes, I am. That's the spark. Some people try looking at their hands. In dreams, hands often shift shape. Others flick a light switch or try to read a sentence twice. In dreams, these things often misbehave. The trick is not to just perform the motion like a checklist. It's to really ask, to pause and wonder deeply, could this be a dream? That moment of reflection is the seed of lucidity. It's not about tricking your mind. It's about gently waking up inside it. Then there's the dream journal. Each morning, as soon as you wake, before the strands of the dream evaporate, you write everything you can remember. Names, colors, scenes, sensations. No judgment, no editing. Just the raw thread of the dream world. At first, it may seem like nothing, a sentence or two, or scattered fragments. But with time, This ritual deepens the connection between your waking and dreaming mind. You begin to remember more, you begin to notice patterns, and most importantly, your mind begins to understand dreams matter. And once your mind gives dreams weight, they begin to reveal more of themselves. Another technique floats in that delicate space between sleep and waking. It's called wake back to bed. You set an alarm for about 5 hours after you fall asleep. When it rings, you wake briefly, just for 10 or 15 minutes. You stay calm, quiet, maybe read a few pages about lucid dreaming or think about a dream goal. Then you go back to sleep, gently, with intention. This middle of the night re-entry seems to prime the brain. It increases the likelihood of awareness bleeding into the dream world. Why does this work? Scientists think it may be because REM sleep is longer and more intense in the second half of the night. By waking and returning, you slide more directly into a REM state while still holding onto a thread of conscious awareness. It's a strange balancing act. Too alert, and you stay awake. Too groggy, and you slip back into unconscious dreaming. But sometimes, in that delicate in-between, the lucid door opens. There's also the mild technique, mnemonic induction, of lucid dreams. It's a mouthful, but the core idea is simple. As you fall asleep, repeat a phrase in your mind, like I will realize I'm dreaming. You say it gently with belief, like a lullaby to your deeper mind. And as you descend into sleep, that phrase may echo in the right moment, bringing you back to awareness inside the dream. None of these techniques are guaranteed, and that's important. Lucid dreaming resists being forced. It doesn't respond well to pressure or frustration. It's more like growing a plant. You create the conditions, you water the soil, but you can't rush the bloom. And sometimes it will surprise you. Sometimes it will happen when you've stopped trying. Interestingly, children often have lucid dreams naturally, without techniques, without journals, just raw, vivid dreaming. Why is that? Some researchers suggest that children live in a world of blurred boundaries. Their imagination is flexible, their days are filled with pretend play, and the line between real and unreal is less rigid. Perhaps the dreaming mind responds to this openness. Perhaps we lose that flexibility as we age, or perhaps, with gentle curiosity, we can relearn it. But why do some people lucid dream easily, while others struggle for years? It's not fully understood. Genetics might play a part. So might personality traits. People who score high in introspection, openness, or mindfulness often report more lucid dreams. But it's not exclusive. Anyone can cultivate the conditions. It's more about patience than talent. Lucid dreaming isn't a skill to be mastered in a week. It unfolds slowly, like learning to hear a faint sound. The more you listen, the clearer it becomes. And the goal isn't necessarily full control or cinematic adventures. Sometimes the most profound lucid dreams are quiet ones, walking through a field, or talking to a version of yourself, or simply watching the stars in a dream sky you know isn't real. And even that raises a gentle question. Does it matter if it's real, if it feels meaningful? So perhaps tonight, as you lie in your bed, you could try something simple. Look at your hands. Ask yourself softly, am I dreaming? Not to answer it, just to plant the seed. And then, if you wake in the middle of the night, maybe for a sip of water or after a strange dream, hold on to the thought, I wonder if I'll notice I'm dreaming next time. And if you do, What would you choose to do first? What would it even feel like to take the reins of your dream, to stand inside that shifting dream world and decide where to go next? For many who've had lucid dreams, that first taste of control feels like discovering a secret level in a game you've played all your life without knowing it existed. You might start small. Maybe you try to open a door and expect a beach on the other side. Maybe you lift your feet, wondering if flight will come. Maybe you reach out your hand to summon someone or something. In that moment, your will becomes the paintbrush. The dream becomes a canvas. And yet, it doesn't always respond how you'd expect. Dream control isn't binary. It's not simply on or off. It's more like a dial with subtle clicks, depending on the depth of your awareness and the flexibility of the dreamscape. Some lucid dreamers report being able to transform their surroundings at will, conjuring cities, changing weather, breathing underwater. Others find the dream resists, glitches, or fades if they try to push too hard. The more you try to bend it, the more it pushes back. And sometimes, the moment you get too excited, the dream dissolves like mist at sunrise. Why does that happen? Some scientists suggest it's a question of emotional stability. Lucidity often depends on a calm, focused awareness. But intense emotion, excitement, fear, even joy, can jolt you awake. The prefrontal cortex regains just enough power to spark realization, but not enough to anchor the dream's integrity. It's like a fragile bridge between waking and sleeping. Too much weight and it collapses. That's why many lucid dreamers practice emotional regulation, staying relaxed, letting go of expectations, observing more than directing. Like a lucid surfer, not a lucid engineer. Still, some degree of control is often possible, and it's incredibly revealing. When you shape your dream, you're not just creating fantasies, you're working with the raw material of your own mind, memories, emotions, fears, hopes, fragments of places and people you've forgotten during the day. So when you ask the dream to show you something, what does it choose to reveal? Interestingly, dream content doesn't seem to emerge from a neat library of stored images. Instead, it behaves more like a dynamic simulation, a spontaneous remix of experiences, emotions, and associations. A grocery store becomes a train station. Your childhood home blends with a hotel you've never visited. Your friend speaks in your father's voice. The brain doesn't pull scenes from memory like files from a cabinet. It rebuilds them on the fly, based on meaning, mood, and mystery. That's why dream landscapes often feel familiar, yet unreal, like looking at your reflection in a curved mirror. And when you gain lucidity, you don't necessarily gain access to a cleaner version of memory. You simply become aware that the simulation is running. You can try to steer it, but you're still inside its rules. You might ask to see a specific person and instead meet a dream character wearing their face, but saying things they never would. You might fly over a city only to find its edges crumbling like cardboard. The dream responds to your intention, but it doesn't always obey. Why? Because your conscious mind is only one player in the game. The deeper layers of your brain, the ones that build the dream, still have their own rules, and they don't always let go. Some dreamers describe lucid dreams as collaborative spaces. You direct, but the dream also improvises. You make a choice, and the dream responds with something unexpected. It's like jazz. You set a rhythm, fly, explore, create, But the background musicians add their own riffs, their own surprises. In this way, lucid dreaming can feel less like control and more like co creation. You're not programming a simulation, you're dancing with your subconscious. This distinction matters because many newcomers to lucid dreaming assume the goal is total control, to become a kind of dream god. But often, the most meaningful experiences come when the dream does something you didn't expect. Maybe you ask a question and the dream responds with an image that moves you. Maybe you open a door and find a memory you hadn't thought about in years. Maybe you just walk through a forest and feel a quiet awe. These aren't always things you choose, but they stay with you. In that way, dream control isn't just about making things happen. It's about making space for insight. And sometimes, the dream offers something deeper than entertainment. It offers clarity, a conversation with a lost loved one, a resolution to a conflict, a new perspective. Of course, we must be cautious with interpretation. Not every dream has a message. Not every image holds a secret. But the possibility that your mind, given freedom and awareness, might reveal something meaningful is worth holding gently. Dreams, after all, are built from the language of images and emotion. They are nonverbal, symbolic. Even when they speak in words, those words often bend and shift, refusing to be pinned down. That's why dream control is so delicate. You can ask your dream for something, but what it gives you may not be literal. It may be a metaphor, a feeling, a story in fragments. So what happens when you try to change the scene? Some dreamers use spinning, physically spinning in place inside the dream, to shift environments. Others close their eyes, visualize the new setting, and open them again. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes the dream slips away entirely. The act of trying too hard can become a form of waking. The trick, again, is softness, like adjusting the lens on a camera, not smashing the glass. There's also the curious case of stability. Some lucid dreams feel crisp and vivid, as real as waking life. Others feel fragile, blurry, dissolving with every step. Dreamers have found odd little tricks to stay grounded, rubbing their dream hands together, focusing on textures, touching the ground, or repeating a phrase. These sensory anchors seem to reinforce the brain's simulation, reminding it to keep building, to stay online. It's as if your brain is a storyteller, trying to remember what comes next, and your awareness helps it hold the thread. And that brings us back to the question, is this like a video game? The answer is, not exactly. A video game has rules, code, physics, designers. A lucid dream has none of these, or perhaps all of them, but rewritten every moment. The logic changes, the boundaries shift, and while it may feel like you're playing a game, you're also creating it, from memory, emotion, and expectation. You are both the player and the engine, which leads to a more unsettling question. If you can create an entire world in your sleep, one that feels real, that you can touch, explore, even control, how do you know you're not doing the same thing right now? It's a disquieting thought, isn't it? Not in a fearful way, but in that quiet, curious way that settles into your chest when you stare at your reflection too long and begin to feel like the image might blink before you do. If our brains can render a dream that looks, feels, and sounds real, so real that we don't question it until something truly odd happens, then what is it that assures us this moment, this waking world, is any more authentic? The question isn't new. Philosophers, mystics, and scientists have toyed with it for centuries. But in lucid dreams, we don't just theorize it, we experience it firsthand. During a lucid dream, the brain builds everything: the sky, the weight of gravity, the sound of footsteps, the voice of a friend, the light coming through a window, all without input from the outside world. These sensations don't come from your ears or eyes or skin. They come from within. The visual cortex, the auditory cortex, the motor regions, they all activate as if simulating a world, one neuron at a time. It's a real-time hallucination built on a scaffold of memory and imagination. But when you're inside it, the illusion is nearly perfect. Until, of course, you notice the cracks. That's when the brain's sleight of hand begins to show. Text changes when you read it twice. Clocks melt. Shadows behave strangely. People don't quite say what you expect. It's not that the dream is unreal in a crude way. It's that the logic is warped, unpredictable, unconcerned with physics or chronology. And yet, while the laws are different, the immersion can be total. You feel present, you feel real. So again, the question rises, how do we know we aren't dreaming now? Is our trust in waking life just a habit? Is it because this world is more consistent, more stable, more shared with others? But dreams, too, feel consistent until they don't. And if a dream can trick all five senses at once, why not the sixth, the sense of certainty itself? Still, we go about our days without doubting too deeply, and that's probably a good thing. If we constantly questioned reality, we might struggle to function. But there's a kind of usefulness in stepping back sometimes, not to lose trust, but to gain perspective. Lucid dreaming offers a gentle reminder that our experience of the world is mediated by a brain capable of fabricating entire universes. And that realization can be strangely liberating, because if your brain can create such vivid experiences during sleep, then it suggests something powerful about the machinery of your own mind. It's not just a processor of facts. It's a storyteller, a theater, a magician, a world builder. And when you become lucid, you get to peek behind the curtain just for a moment and realize you are both the audience and the playwright. But let's move more deeply now into the architecture of this experience. What's happening in the brain during a lucid dream that makes this shift from passive dreaming to active awareness possible? The answer, while still unfolding in scientific research, points toward a fascinating blend of wakeful and sleep-like activity. In a typical dream, especially during REM sleep, the brain is active, but the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, planning, and self-reflection, is largely dimmed. That's why dreams are often bizarre, lacking consistent logic or continuity. You're along for the ride, watching strange events unfold without questioning them. But in a lucid dream, something different happens. Brain scans have shown that the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the area linked to working memory and conscious decision-making, lights up during lucidity. It's as though part of the waking brain reactivates inside the dream. This hybrid state, dream logic with conscious insight, creates a rare, in-between mental landscape, one where imagination and awareness coexist in a delicate balance. Think of it like a dimmer switch slowly turning up the lights in a theater. The show is still happening, but now you're aware you're watching it. You see the stage, you recognize the actors, and sometimes you can even rewrite the script. That blend of brain activity is fragile, though. Too much activation, and the illusion collapses. You wake up. Too little, and you lose lucidity, slipping back into passive dreaming. So, the key to sustaining a lucid dream is balance. Not pushing, not pulling, just observing with quiet intention. It's not unlike meditation, where awareness rests gently without grasping. And like meditation, lucid dreaming often improves with practice, not force. Still, the most surprising aspect might not be the brainwaves or the simulations. It might be the strange characters who populate your dreams. When you become lucid and speak to a dream figure, you might expect silence, nonsense, or static. But often, the dream responds. The character speaks, sometimes with humor, sometimes with wisdom, sometimes with cryptic messages that echo long after waking. Who exactly are these dream characters? Are they fragments of yourself, echoes of people you've met, constructs generated by the subconscious, or something stranger still, consciousness avatars, parts of your mind that wear different faces to speak truths you're not ready to hear? The science is uncertain, but the experience can be hauntingly vivid. Some dreamers report emotional conversations, arguments, even teachings, as if the dream itself has a mind. And that raises yet another question. In a lucid dream, are you truly alone? You may find yourself standing in a room with a figure you didn't summon. They look at you with a knowing gaze. You ask them a question, and they answer in a way you don't understand, but feel deeply. And when you wake, you remember not just the words, but the weight of their presence. Was it just your brain role-playing with itself, or was it something more? Perhaps that's the beauty of lucid dreaming. It invites mystery, but doesn't demand answers. It opens the door to wonder without needing to shut it again. You can explore, reflect, observe. You can shape the world or simply walk through it. You can talk to your fear, fly through clouds, revisit forgotten memories. And through it all, you know what? This is a dream. And yet, it matters. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, maybe ask yourself one more time, if I become lucid, what question will I ask the dream? And what kind of answer would you hope for in that silent theater of the mind? Because once awareness has settled in and the dream obeys your gaze, or seems to, a natural instinct arises to test the boundaries, to play, to ask. And in this lucid space, questions take on a new flavor. Not because you expect facts, but because every response, every shape, every shift is an echo from your own inner world. You are no longer in a place made of matter. You are in a place made of meaning. And when you bend the world in a lucid dream, what bends with it and what resists tells you something subtle about yourself. The earliest efforts at dream control often begin with flight. It's the most common impulse. Suddenly aware, suddenly weightless, many people leap into the sky instinctively, as if gravity was only ever a suggestion. And in those moments, dreamers describe sensations, both exhilarating and oddly familiar. The pull of air, the glide, the sense of escaping boundaries. But the mechanics vary. Some soar like birds, others float like balloons, and some find themselves awkwardly flapping, stalling midair, or drifting sideways. The dream doesn't always cooperate. Why? The answer lies partly in belief. Lucid dreams are shaped not only by your conscious intent, but also by your subconscious expectations. If part of you doubts that you can fly, the dream might reflect that hesitation, grounding you or distorting the motion. This is why experienced lucid dreamers often practice affirmations or visualizations before sleep, not just to summon lucidity, but to strengthen the expectation that what they desire will unfold. In a lucid dream, doubt is gravity, belief is lift. Other dreamers experiment with summoning objects or changing the environment. You might want a door to appear, or a staircase, or a sunset that lasts longer than usual. Some spin around, using the motion to transition scenes. Others close their dream eyes, picture a location, and reopen them, hoping the landscape has shifted. The success of these techniques varies wildly. The more confident you are, and the more gently that confidence is held, the more likely the dream is to respond. Too much pressure, and the illusion collapses. Too little, and the dream ignores you entirely. It's a strange, shimmering tension. You're navigating a world made of expectations, colored by memory, powered by imagination, and sculpted by emotion. This isn't like changing settings in a simulation. It's more like influencing the weather, not with switches, but with subtle shifts in internal atmosphere. That's why so much of lucid dreaming feels intuitive. You don't just act, you sense, you guide, you trust. And in this trust, something deeper often unfolds. Dream control, despite its flashy reputation, rarely stays about spectacle. It begins with flight and fantasy, yes, but many lucid dreamers, over time, move toward introspection. They find themselves using the lucid space to ask questions they wouldn't dare voice while awake. They revisit conversations long past. They stand inside old homes. They face shadows that used to haunt them. Not because the dream is inherently therapeutic, but because in the safety of this dream world, the usual defenses are softened. Fear is still present, but its edges are blurred. Pain can be explored, observed, even spoken to. And so, some lucid dreams become emotional laboratories. The dreamer asks to meet their younger self, or to see their anxiety given shape, or to talk to someone they've lost. The results can be profoundly moving, not because the dream offers objective truths, but because it allows a different kind of confrontation, one without the usual noise, a quiet conversation with the subconscious in the language it speaks most fluently, metaphor, image, symbol. Consider someone who carries a fear they cannot name. In waking life, the fear is background static, low, insistent, unclear. But in a lucid dream, that fear might appear as a figure, a hallway, a storm on the horizon, and the dreamer, instead of running, might walk toward it, speak to it, ask what it wants. The dream may answer with words, or it may simply soften, but the act itself, of turning toward rather than away, can create a subtle shift in the dreamer's emotional landscape. Not a cure, not a breakthrough, but a change. This use of lucid dreaming as emotional exploration has caught the attention of psychologists and researchers. Studies have explored its potential in confronting nightmares, processing grief, and reducing anxiety. In particular, those who suffer from recurring night terrors have found relief through lucidity. The moment they realize this is a dream, they gain the power to change it, or at least to stop fearing it. For some, this moment is life-changing. The monster in the dream is no longer a tyrant, it becomes a messenger, or it simply vanishes. But lucid dreaming is not always serene. Control can be fleeting. Awareness can slip. Some dreams rebel. The characters grow hostile. The environment shifts in unpredictable ways. This isn't a glitch. It's a reminder that the dreaming mind is vast, and lucidity lights only part of it. You may be aware, but not omnipotent. And sometimes, the parts of your mind you don't fully understand may resist your attempts to command them. That's why some lucid dreamers describe encounters with dream figures who refuse to acknowledge they are in a dream. You tell them, "This isn't real," and they frown, they argue, they plead with you not to wake up. Are these just dramatized fragments of your psyche? Or are they something stranger, simulations with simulated self-awareness? The science remains skeptical, but the experience leaves an imprint, not because it's supernatural, but because it reveals just how convincingly the brain can create otherness. Even within your own dream, not everything feels like it belongs to you. This autonomy is part of what makes lucid dreams feel alive. Even when you know it's all emerging from within, parts of the dream surprise you, defy you, teach you. And that sense of otherness, of encountering a thought that didn't feel like yours, is humbling. It suggests the mind is not a single voice, but a chorus. And lucidity, rather than giving you control over every part, lets you listen to more of the symphony. So if you return to lucidity tonight, perhaps don't rush to take control. Instead, notice, listen. What is the dream already doing? What is it asking you to see? What happens if you simply walk and watch and follow, as though the dream too has something to show you? And as you walk, barefoot perhaps, or floating just slightly above the floor, you might start to notice not only where you are, but what's being made from memory, from imagination, from something deeper and more slippery than either. A hallway that looks like your childhood school, but with windows you don't remember. A voice speaking in your mother's tone, but saying something she never said. A sky that feels like every dream sky you've ever seen, too wide, too close, colored like twilight and ink. It's here in these edges between the familiar and the surreal that you begin to notice what the dream is really made of. Because your brain isn't simply pulling images from a database. It's creating, moment by moment, a living simulation that folds together experience, emotion, metaphor, and memory. It doesn't ask, "What did that tree look like?" It asks, "What should a tree feel like here?" and builds accordingly. The result is a landscape where form follows feeling, where logic bends toward meaning. The tree may glow, it may speak, it may turn to water when you touch it, and somehow it all fits, not by waking logic, but by a deeper internal coherence, a logic of the dreaming self. Neurologically, the explanation lies in the brain's construction of space and identity. The visual cortex, the hippocampus, the limbic system all coordinate to render environments and narratives. But during dreaming, especially lucid dreaming, the brain's filters are loosened. Connections fire more freely. The boundary between idea and image becomes paper thin. This is why dreams feel both deeply symbolic and emotionally raw. You're not just remembering a moment, you're reliving its emotional contour, sculpted into a scene. That's also why dreams feel meaningful, even when they don't make sense. So when you speak to a dream figure, You're not merely conjuring a puppet, you're engaging with a construct formed from this complex interplay of memory, belief, and subconscious inference. They may speak clearly or in riddles. They may know things you forgot you knew. They may embody feelings you haven't yet admitted to yourself. And in lucid dreaming, this interaction becomes deliberate. You can ask, "Why are you here?" or "What do you represent?" The answers, if they come, might not be direct. They might be shown instead of said. But the impression they leave can linger long after waking, long after the specifics are gone. There's something else that becomes fascinating once you start examining dreams closely, the way they treat time. In waking life, time is linear, strict, precise. In dreams, it flows like water. It loops, accelerates, pauses, and folds in on itself. You may live through hours in a few minutes of REM sleep. You may jump from one scene to another with no transition, yet feel a seamless continuity. Lucid dreamers often report this sensation of expanded time, as though a single dream contains more than a night should hold. Researchers have even tested this. In sleep labs, lucid dreamers have been asked to perform specific tasks, like counting to 10 or making eye movements as a signal, and then researchers measured how long those tasks took inside the dream. The results are mixed. Some tasks match waking time, others stretch or compress strangely. The conclusion? Time in dreams is elastic. It's not governed by the same rhythms we rely on while awake. And when you're lucid, you can feel this flexibility. You can stretch a moment, slow it down, savor it. But what governs this elastic quality? Is it the absence of external stimulus, clocks, sunlight, schedules? Or is it that the dreaming brain constructs time as it constructs space, not as an absolute framework, but as a feeling, a narrative necessity? You may feel that an event took an hour because the dream decided it should, because that's what the story needed. This opens up strange possibilities. Could you live entire days in a dream? Weeks? What would it mean to experience years, emotionally, within a single night? These are not just science fiction curiosities. They brush against deep philosophical ideas about memory, identity, and perception. Because if your brain can generate not only a world, but a sense of time spent in it, and if you can remember and reflect on that experience, then who's to say what's real and what's simulated? Isn't lived experience the final measure? Lucid dreams challenge this boundary. They show that reality, at least in terms of sensation and memory, can be self-generated. And yet, we wake. Always. The dream ends, or fades, or is broken by the alarm clock, the rustle of sheets, the sudden sense that something is missing. The immersion cracks. The scenery peels away. We open our eyes and return to the weight of the real world. Gravity, light, breath, morning. And often, the dream slips with it. What was vivid becomes vague. What felt eternal becomes unreachable. Why is it so hard to hold on to dream memory? It turns out that remembering dreams, especially lucid ones, is a skill in itself. The neurotransmitters involved in REM sleep, like acetylcholine, promote vivid imagery but reduce memory consolidation. The prefrontal cortex, again, is to blame or thank. It's less active during sleep, which helps keep the dream world fluid and imaginative, but also means we retain fewer details. That's why writing down your dreams as soon as you wake can be so powerful. It creates a bridge between the dream logic and waking language, preserving some of what would otherwise vanish. And there's another layer to consider. When you remember a lucid dream, especially a powerful one, it doesn't just stay as a memory. It becomes part of your mental landscape. It colors your next night. It shapes your expectations. You begin to believe in the possibility of lucidity. And in the dream world, belief is the most powerful tool. The more you trust that awareness can return, the more likely it does. That's how lucid dreaming grows, not as a trick, but as a relationship between you and your own mind, between intention and imagination, between consciousness and sleep. It's delicate, it's personal, and it deepens the more you notice it. So as you drift tonight with this thought cradled in your mind, consider this. If time bends in dreams, if memory dances, if reality itself becomes elastic, then where will you go if you find yourself lucid once again? Maybe you'll find yourself walking through a familiar city, one that holds the same buildings and landmarks as your waking world, yet feels altered in a way you can't name. The light might have a softness that doesn't belong to any real sun, or the streets might be wider, quieter, filled with a sense that something is just around the corner. You might pass a window and see your own face looking back, except it isn't quite yours. Or maybe instead, you'll be in a place you've never seen, but somehow recognize, a landscape your conscious mind doesn't recall, yet your dreaming mind calls home. These strange, layered places are where lucid dreams begin to blur into something more than just mental experiences. They begin to resemble inner worlds. What does it mean to be conscious within one of these spaces? Not just aware that you're dreaming, but aware of your own awareness? In philosophy and neuroscience, this question sits at the edge of a deep and foggy cliff. Waking consciousness is hard enough to define. It's a combination of perception, memory, agency, and self-reflection. But in a lucid dream, all of those things seem to exist, just rearranged. You can reflect, act, plan, even question the nature of the dream itself. You can stop mid-dream and wonder, what should I do next? And your answer will feel real, coherent, yours. But are you really you in that dream, or just a dream version of yourself who believes they are in control? Some researchers argue that lucid dreaming isn't true consciousness, but a simulation of it, like a play in which you're both actor and audience, following a script you didn't write. After all, everything in the dream, the sky, the people, the dialogue, even your own sense of self, is generated by the same system. There's no external input. So how do you know your awareness is genuine? The question deepens when we consider the continuity of self. In waking life, we feel like the same person from one day to the next. But in dreams, that sense can change. You might be yourself in appearance, but think in a different voice. Or you might take on a different form, younger, older, another gender, even a different species. And yet, inside the dream, it feels normal. You don't question it. Your sense of I remains anchored even as everything else shifts. What does that say about the nature of identity? Lucid dreams bring this question into sharp focus, because when you become lucid, you don't just observe the dream, you often try to assert your will within it, and in doing so, you define a self. The one who chooses, the one who directs, the one who knows. But even then, strange things does happen. You set a goal to fly, to visit a place, to speak to someone, and suddenly the dream veers away, introduces something new. A door appears you didn't imagine. A sound draws you down a hallway. Are these random glitches, or are they suggestions from a deeper part of you? Are you really in charge? Some lucid dreamers describe this as a layered awareness. On one level, they act as they would in waking life, deciding, reacting, exploring. On another, they feel guided, as if part of their mind is scripting the dream in real time, offering them puzzles, characters, environments, and the lucid self becomes an explorer in a world that is being built from within, yet still feels partially unknown. This is where the boundary between consciousness and subconsciousness begins to shimmer. We often imagine these as distinct, the conscious mind like a spotlight, the subconscious like a hidden cave. But in a lucid dream, those lines blur. The spotlight moves, revealing not a separate place, but a part of the same terrain. Your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, they all exist together, layered and interwoven. And when you act in a lucid dream, you're not acting alone. You're in dialogue with yourself. This is why lucid dreams can feel so intimate, so revealing. Not because they always present clear answers, but because they show you how complex your inner landscape really is. You might meet a dream character who challenges you, contradicts you, even lectures you, and their voice feels distinct. You ask yourself, is this my own thought, dressed in another's clothing, or is it something deeper, a part of me I haven't listened to in a long time? There's also the question of memory. In waking life, memory defines much of our identity. We know who we are by remembering who we've been, but in dreams, memory becomes fluid. You might remember things in a dream that never happened, or forget things you know well. You might carry a false memory, a belief that you've lived in a dream city for years, even though you just created it. This dream memory feels as solid as any waking one until you awaken and it dissolves. So how much of our identity is just a memory we believe in? Lucid dreams offer a curious laboratory for this idea. Some dreamers intentionally revisit memories, real ones, to examine them more closely. They return to a childhood home. They reenact a conversation. They try to observe a moment as it was, but they often discover the memory isn't fixed. It morphs, rooms shift, words change, emotions swell. The memory becomes not a replay, but a reconstruction, influenced by how we feel now, what we hope for, what we fear. And this reconstruction reveals a truth. Our memories, even waking ones, are never perfectly preserved. They are stories we continue to tell ourselves. In lucid dreams, those stories become interactive. We can step into them. We can change them. Not to rewrite history, but to engage with how history lives inside us now. And that brings a powerful insight. Maybe lucid dreaming isn't just about control or awareness. Maybe it's about reflection, a mirror, not of how the world is, but of how we carry it inside. And that mirror can be tender. It can show us things we've missed, feelings we've pushed aside, desires we haven't voiced. The lucid space invites us not only to explore, but to listen to the parts of ourselves that speak not in logic, but in symbol. A door that won't open, a person who walks away, a song that repeats. These aren't puzzles to solve. They are fragments to hold gently. So if you find yourself lucid tonight, standing on a street that shouldn't exist, under a sky that seems to know your name, maybe pause before trying to fly. Look around, feel the ground, ask softly, what am I meant to see here? Perhaps the answer comes not as a word, but as a flicker, a movement in the corner of your vision, a shift in the texture of the sky, a feeling in your chest that you're not alone. Not afraid, not exactly, but aware. Something or someone is present. You turn, and there they are, a figure in the dream who seems different. Not just a projection, not just another face conjured from memory, but something that looks back at you with its own awareness. Some lucid dreamers call this a guide. Others call it the shadow. Some say it's just a trick of the subconscious wearing a mask. But whatever name you give it, the experience feels real. It feels like a meeting. And that's when the emotional layer of lucid dreaming deepens. Because not every lucid dream is filled with light and control. Some dreams push back, some resist your commands, some twist in directions you didn't choose, and sometimes those directions carry fear. You might try to walk through a wall and get stuck halfway. You might try to fly and fall instead. You might speak to a figure who suddenly turns on you. Why does this happen? Isn't lucidity supposed to give us power? The truth is, lucidity does not erase emotion. It invites it in. In fact, becoming lucid often heightens emotion, because now you're not just watching the dream, you're involved in it. You are awake inside the symbolic landscape of your mind, where every object might hold a feeling. Every hallway might lead to something unresolved. And if there is fear, it doesn't disappear just because you know you're dreaming. In some cases, it becomes more potent because now you can see it clearly. This is where nightmares become something more than just distressing stories. In a lucid dream, a nightmare can be confronted, not always easily, not always with success, but the possibility exists. If you see a monster chasing you and you realize you're dreaming, you have a choice. You can run, as usual, or you can turn around. Face it. Ask it a question. That moment, simple as it sounds, can shift something fundamental inside you. You're not just escaping the fear, you're meeting it, listening to it. And sometimes it answers. Some dreamers report astonishing encounters during these moments. The monster dissolves. The dark hallway brightens. The figure speaks in a familiar voice. Those are not guaranteed outcomes, and they don't always happen right away. But when they do, they carry a weight that lingers. It's not that the dream has solved anything. It's that it allowed you to experience your own courage, your own willingness to stay present, even in discomfort. In psychology, this process has been explored in the context of lucid dreaming therapy, particularly for those suffering from recurring nightmares, post-traumatic stress, or unresolved emotional conflict. Therapists may guide clients to become aware during their dreams and use that awareness to shift the narrative. The client doesn't have to overpower the dream. They only have to remember they have agency within it. That recognition alone can lessen the grip of fear. But this emotional intensity isn't limited to nightmares. Lucid dreams can evoke longing, joy, grief, tenderness, sometimes all at once. You might find yourself standing on a hill at sunset, overwhelmed by a feeling you can't name. You might speak to a person you lost years ago and wake with tears on your cheeks. You might hear music that doesn't exist in the waking world, but which feels like a memory. These moments aren't just curiosities, they're experiences. And though they happen in sleep, they become part of your emotional history. This is why the question of real versus not real becomes so slippery in lucid dreaming. The dream may not be real in terms of physics, but the feelings, the insights, the sensations are undeniably yours. They come from you and they return with you. And sometimes what happens in a dream shifts how you move through waking life. You wake with a new sense of possibility, a softened pain, a question answered or perhaps just better understood. Of course, not all dream encounters are profound. Some are strange, absurd, filled with non sequiturs and visual tricks. You might find yourself arguing with a talking fridge or attending a concert underwater. But even these surreal moments can hold unexpected meaning. They reflect the playful, nonlinear nature of the dreaming mind. They show how creativity and chaos coexist. And in lucidity, you're given the rare opportunity to observe this in motion, to participate in your mind's spontaneous theater. But not every lucid dream stays in your control. Sometimes, even when you realize you're dreaming, the dream keeps shifting. You might try to hold on to the scene, only to find it slipping away like fog in your hands. Colors blur, figures melt, the floor beneath you loses substance. This is not failure. It's the nature of the space. Dreams are fluid, and lucidity doesn't make them solid. It just lets you float more consciously in the current. Some dreamers use techniques to stabilize the dream, rubbing their hands together, spinning, touching nearby objects to engage the senses. Others focus on sound or texture. These actions seem to re-anchor the brain's simulation, giving it something to build around. But even with these tricks, lucidity can fade. The world blurs, awareness slips, and sometimes, without warning, you find yourself waking up, eyes open, heart beating a little faster, mind buzzing with everything you just felt. And as you lie there, blinking in the dark, a quiet question forms. What was that? Where did I just go? And why does it still feel like I'm partly there? That lingering feeling is perhaps the most mysterious part of lucid dreaming. It's not just a memory, it's a residue, a sense that you touched something deep within yourself, not an answer, not a destination, but a place made of thought and feeling, where your waking self meets something older, quieter, perhaps wiser. So tonight, if you find yourself aware in your dream, standing before a door or a path or a stranger with familiar eyes, consider staying just a little longer. Not to change the dream, not to control it, but to listen, to feel, to ask softly, what part of me lives here, and what has it been waiting to say? And perhaps what it's been waiting to say doesn't arrive in words at all. Perhaps it comes as a change in the air, a shift in gravity, a silent understanding that wraps around you like the warmth of memory. In that lucid space, where time and form dissolve into experience, meanings are rarely spoken directly. They're conveyed through imagery, through sensation, through that slow unfolding of a dream logic that doesn't obey grammar, but still makes a kind of sense, a sense your body understands, even if your waking mind can't explain it. And nowhere is this dream logic more strange and wonderful than in how dreams treat time. In waking life, time marches forward, steady, relentless, indifferent. But in dreams, time unspools. It bends, folds, stretches. You might live an entire afternoon between two beats of a heart, or you might cross a continent in the time it takes to exhale. In lucid dreams, where you are conscious of this shift, the elasticity of time becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a sensation you can feel in your bones. You might walk down a street that seems to go on for miles, only to glance back and realize you've traveled a distance no city could hold. You might sit and watch the sun rise and fall in one long breath, each moment crisp and golden. Time, in these dreams, isn't just passing, it's forming around you, responding to your presence. And sometimes, just sometimes, it pauses altogether. Everything holds still, the leaves, the light, the wind in your hair, and you become aware of something vast and gentle underneath the ticking of hours. Not silence exactly, but stillness, the absence of rush. This is not just poetic, it's neurologically grounded. The parts of the brain responsible for tracking time, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the basal ganglia, are influenced by rhythm, memory, and sensory feedback. In dreams, many of those cues are altered or absent. There's no sunrise, no clock, no shared calendar. So the brain generates time as a story rather than a schedule. And in lucid dreams, where your narrative sense is active, you might feel that time responds to your choices. Slow down, and the world slows with you. Run, and the city flickers past like pages turning. It's not time as we know it, it's dream time. Some dreamers have tried to measure this. In controlled studies, lucid dreamers have been asked to perform tasks and signal with eye movements, the only voluntary action that translates clearly to the waking world while asleep. These experiments show that dream time often roughly mirrors real time for short tasks. But for emotional or complex experiences, time becomes inconsistent. It accelerates, contracts, or expands depending on your focus, which raises a strange possibility. Could a dream feel like a lifetime? And if it could, what would that mean for our sense of self? In dreams, we measure time emotionally. A single glance, a single sentence can carry the weight of hours. A conversation might feel like a reunion. A moment of flying might feel like the freedom of years. These aren't exaggerations. They're the brain's way of distilling meaning. And when you're lucid, you're aware of it as it happens. You can pause and marvel at the fact that you're feeling a whole story in just a breath, that you're remembering things you never lived, that you're becoming someone who didn't exist before you fell asleep. This is why some people describe lucid dreams as simulations, not of reality, but of possibility. You live out choices, explore paths, meet versions of yourself that could have been. You experience not just different places, but different timelines. And all of it is woven from the same raw material: memory, emotion, desire, and curiosity. The mind becomes a laboratory for experience itself. And in lucidity, you're not just watching the experiment, you're conducting it. But there's more, because time in dreams doesn't only bend for you. Sometimes it reveals things. You might see a future you weren't expecting. You might receive a message that feels prophetic, not because it tells you what will happen, but because it helps you see what matters. Some dreamers report moments of clarity, decisions made with calm conviction, as if a wiser voice had spoken. Whether this is the subconscious speaking or simply the dreamer seeing their own truth more clearly, it leaves an impression. And in that impression, something shifts. Waking life, too, begins to feel more fluid. You notice how quickly days pass when you're not paying attention. You feel the elasticity of time during a quiet afternoon or a long wait. You realize that just like in dreams, attention is what gives time its texture. That when you're fully present, even a moment can be vast. Lucid dreaming trains that muscle, the muscle of presence. It reminds you that time, whether asleep or awake, is felt more than measured. So, what happens when you return from a lucid dream that stretched long and slow? What does it feel like to wake and remember not a flash, but an arc, a sequence of events that played out with detail and depth? You might open your eyes and feel as though you've traveled. You might carry a mood that doesn't match your surroundings, a sense of closure or possibility or longing. And when you look at the clock and see that only 10 minutes have passed, something inside you smiles, confused and humbled, because you know now time isn't a cage, it's a fabric. And in dreams, you've touched its folds. That sense of time's malleability can change how we live. It can soften the rush. It can bring patience. If a dream can hold a story in a second, then maybe a single moment in waking life can hold more than we usually let it. Maybe when we pause, when we pay attention, when we breathe slowly and notice the world around us, we can feel some of that same expansion, not to escape reality, but to enrich it. So tonight, if you become aware inside your dream and find yourself watching the sky change colors or hearing the hum of a city you never visited, stay a moment longer. Walk without rushing. Look closely. Time here will stretch with you. And maybe, just maybe, in that stretch, you'll see something you've been waiting to find. And what if what you find is not a place, not a person, not even a memory, but a question, something quiet, something vast, something that doesn't ask for an answer, but for your attention? Lucid dreams, in their most delicate moments, have a way of leaving questions open-ended, like footsteps fading into mist. You realize that the dream was never just a playground or a theater or a simulation. It was also a mirror, angled just slightly, reflecting not who you are, but who you might be if all the noise was silenced and only the wondering remained. This is where lucid dreaming crosses into philosophy, not because it explains the nature of reality, but because it invites you to reflect on how you relate to it. If you can be conscious in a world that isn't real, and if that consciousness can feel as full, as vibrant, as meaningful as waking life, then what is the essential thread that ties your identity together? What makes your experience valid? Is it the physical world, the continuity of time, or is it something softer, awareness itself? The ancient thought experiments begin to feel less like intellectual games and more like echoes of personal experience. The idea of the brain in a vat, a consciousness receiving simulated input, believing it to be real, is no longer purely theoretical once you've dreamed with your eyes open, because now you've seen what it's like to move through a world entirely generated from within, to touch walls that aren't there, to hear voices that emerge from silence, to see yourself seeing and still feel real. Some dreamers emerge from lucid dreams with a kind of philosophical vertigo. They begin to wonder whether waking life is just another layer, one that happens to persist longer, one that obeys consistent rules, but still ultimately a construction of perception. The idea of living in a simulation, once the realm of science fiction and theoretical physics, begins to carry emotional weight. Not because the dream proves it, but because it reveals how thoroughly the mind can be immersed in a world of its own making. And yet, lucid dreaming doesn't lead most people to nihilism. Quite the opposite. It tends to soften the edges. You see that meaning isn't fixed by the rules of the outside world. It's something we bring with us into dreams, into waking, into every interaction. The realization that experience can be vivid and profound in a dream doesn't make waking life feel empty. It makes it feel more precious, more flexible, more intimate. If the world of a lucid dream can be shaped by belief and attention, maybe our waking world can too, in quieter ways. This doesn't mean we control reality with our thoughts, but it does suggest that our interpretation, our focus, our presence plays a larger role than we usually admit. And lucid dreams become a kind of rehearsal for that presence, a place where we learn to hold experience gently, to question it without fear, to explore it without needing it to conform. They teach us to listen to the unsaid, to follow symbols, to slow down and look around, not just out of curiosity, but out of respect for the richness that can arise when we stop rushing. And so, a lucid dream can become not just an event, but a way of being. Even when you're awake, the dream teaches you to ask, is this real? Not to doubt, but to wonder, not to reject what's in front of you, but to look more deeply into it. The person you're talking to, are you really hearing them? The task you're doing, are you present in it? The place you're in, are you noticing its texture, its light, its rhythm? Lucid dreaming sharpens these questions, and in doing so, it sharpens your attention to the life you live when your eyes are open. This is what the ancient traditions hinted at when they spoke of dream yoga or conscious sleep. Not just the control of dreams, but the cultivation of awareness across all states. The idea that consciousness, like a candle, can remain lit in waking, in dreaming, in deep sleep, and that by keeping it lit, you begin to see patterns, truths, possibilities that otherwise fade into the background. Whether this is metaphor or metaphysics, the effect is the same. Lucid dreaming becomes a spiritual practice for some, a form of inner exploration that doesn't depend on belief, only on noticing. And in that noticing, strange things happen. You begin to remember dreams more vividly. You start to wake with questions, not just memories. You find yourself pausing in the day, wondering briefly if this is a dream, not out of confusion, but out of curiosity. You laugh at a coincidence and think, this feels like a dream thing. And that gentle awareness seated in sleep begins to grow roots in waking life. It's not about escaping into dreams. It's about expanding your definition of reality to include more of what you experience, even if that experience unfolds behind closed eyes. And in that expansion, something tender happens. You begin to treat your inner world with more kindness. You stop dismissing your imagination as mere fancy. You listen more carefully to your intuition. You give your emotional landscapes the same respect you give physical ones. And maybe, just maybe, you become more whole, because a lucid dream, at its heart, is a conversation between the layers of your own mind. And if you're willing to keep listening after you wake, the conversation continues. You carry its symbols, its moments, its lingering sensations, like pebbles, in your pocket. And over time, they form a language, one that doesn't tell you what to do or who to be, but reminds you that you are always more than you think, that you contain not just memories and thoughts, but entire worlds. So when you dream tonight, and if that flicker of awareness finds you once again, let it be soft, Let it be curious. Walk slowly. Ask questions. Watch what the dream gives you, not because it holds secrets, but because it reflects how deeply you are already dreaming your life into being. One choice, one breath, one moment at a time. And within those quiet, drifting moments, when you begin to grasp that the dream is listening to you, as much as you are listening to it, another question emerges. Not just what is possible in a lucid dream, but what is permissible. You realize that control is not the final goal. Control is an opening, and from that opening, an ethical shape begins to form. If you can do anything in a dream, would you? Should you? Who are you when there are no consequences? So, who do you choose to be when no one is watching, not even yourself in the usual way? In lucid dreams, the boundaries of right and wrong are suddenly stripped of their usual structure. There are no laws, no observers, no physical harm. It is, in one sense, a free space. But the freedom comes with its own strange gravity, because even if the world around you is imaginary, your choices feel real. You feel what you do. You remember what you did, and the echoes return with you. Some people use lucidity as a kind of rehearsal space, experimenting with decisions they're not ready to make in waking life, practicing conversations, trying different responses, exploring moral puzzles. But others quickly discover that even in dreams, certain lines feel heavy to cross, and that weight isn't imposed from the outside, it comes from within. You might try to manipulate a dream character, only to find them resisting you, not with force, but with presence. You might tell yourself, this is only a simulation, yet still feel uneasy when you see pain on a face or disappointment in a voice. The realism of the dream world, combined with your own emotional memory, creates a powerful illusion, not of judgment, but of consequence. Not because the dream punishes you, but because part of you understands that even simulated actions leave a mark. That mark doesn't have to be negative. Many lucid dreamers find that when they act with kindness or curiosity in the dream, the environment responds in kind. A harsh city softens. A faceless figure becomes familiar. A long-lost memory returns not as pain, but as something softened. And though these events aren't real in the waking sense, they produce real emotional shifts. You wake feeling lighter, more connected, as if you've reconciled something quietly inside. This is the strange alchemy of lucid dreaming. It turns thought into experience. The dream doesn't just reflect your conscious commands. It reflects your emotional tone, your subconscious assumptions, your beliefs about yourself and others. If you enter the dream expecting hostility, you may find it. If you enter with curiosity, the world might open. Not always, not predictably, but often enough that the pattern becomes clear. You shape the dream, and the dream shapes you in return. That's why some therapists have begun to explore lucid dreaming as a therapeutic tool, not just for treating nightmares, but for rehearsing resilience, for exploring inner conflicts, for reprocessing trauma in a space where the dreamer has agency. In waking therapy, it can take months or years to reach certain emotional layers, but in lucid dreams, those layers often present themselves directly, not as concepts, but as imagery. A locked room, a forgotten photograph, a younger self waiting on a bench. These symbols aren't chosen at random. They emerge from the same emotional architecture that governs waking thought, only now they are unfiltered. In lucidity, the dreamer is not merely watching these scenes, but engaging with them. They can ask questions, offer comfort, change outcomes. And though the therapeutic value of this is still being researched, the anecdotal evidence is compelling. People wake up with insights they couldn't articulate before. They feel that they've said something they needed to say, or heard something they'd forgotten how to hear. But just as important as healing is the simple act of recognition, of seeing the self in a new light. Lucid dreams create an interior space where you are not just a bundle of thoughts, but a presence with choices. You see yourself make decisions without scripts. You feel not because someone else provoked you, but because your own mind constructed the moment. And this self-generated experience can be startlingly honest. You can't blame the dream. It's you, all of it, even the parts that surprise you. So what do you do with this responsibility? For some, it becomes a practice, a way to test values, to try new modes of being, a way to strengthen empathy, not just for others, but for yourself. Because often, the harshest judgments in dreams come from within. You might speak to a dream figure who says something cruel, only to realize it's your own voice, magnified. And when you respond not with anger, but with understanding, the dream changes. The figure softens, the world shifts. This is not magic. It is not therapy in the clinical sense, but it is real in another way. It's experiential. An experience, even when generated by the dreaming mind, leaves an impression on the soul. Lucid dreaming becomes not a realm of fantasy, but a realm of reflection, a place to witness yourself in motion, to see who you are when all else falls away. And what if you push the dream to its edge? What if you ask it to show you something you've never seen? Not a place, but a truth? Some dreamers speak of profound experiences that follow such requests. They find themselves in vast, empty spaces, floating, listening to a sound they can't describe, or standing before something immense, unknowable, and strangely kind. These dreams are not always vivid in detail, but they carry a feeling of having touched something bigger than thought. Some say it's the self expanded. Others say it's the unconscious. Some call it spirit. Others, just the deepest silence of the mind. But all agree, it is humbling, and it cannot be summoned at will. It comes when the dream is ready, or when you are. So tonight, if you find yourself lucid again, and the dream stands still before you like a waiting sky, you might ask softly, what kind of person am I when nothing is watching but the night? And perhaps the sky answers with color, or the shape of wind, or a face that is both known and unknowable. Perhaps it answers not with a reply, but with a reflection, not in glass or water, but in sensation. Because sometimes in lucid dreams, the answer is not something told, but something felt. You simply understand with a softness that can't be reasoned through. The knowledge slips into your awareness without edges, like warmth settling into your skin. And afterward, when you wake, there's no quote to write down, no symbol to decode. There's just that stillness, that quiet resonance that lingers long after you've opened your eyes. This is the kind of dream that stays with you. It doesn't matter if it lasted 3 minutes or 30. It doesn't matter what the scenery looked like or what happened in it. What matters is the texture of the experience, the awareness that you touched something that felt larger than yourself, even though it came from within. Some people describe this as mystical, others see it as neurological, but for most, the labels don't matter. The experience itself is enough. And in that space, where lucidity and mystery touch, something else often emerges: creativity. Not just in the sense of artistic expression, but in the purest form of imagination, the ability to make something new, something surprising, something deeply personal. In dreams, especially lucid ones, the mind stops filtering ideas. It stops rejecting the strange or the illogical. It lets metaphors take shape, lets impossible combinations exist without resistance. And this openness creates conditions for insights that waking thought would never allow. Many artists, scientists, and thinkers throughout history have spoken of dreams as sources of inspiration. The chemist Kekulé dreamed of the structure of benzene as a snake biting its tail. Paul McCartney said the melody for Yesterday came to him in sleep. Salvador Dali deliberately dipped in and out of the dream state to access strange and vivid images. These aren't coincidences. They're evidence of how the dreaming mind rearranges memory and emotion into something new. And when lucidity is added to the mix, the dreamer gains not just inspiration, but participation. Imagine stepping into a painting not yet created, walking through its shapes and shadows, touching the colors, or composing a melody by listening to how the dream sounds, or writing lines of dialogue that come not from planning, but from speaking with characters who respond unexpectedly. These aren't hallucinations, they're co-creations. The dream provides the material. Your lucidity gives you the power to shape and remember it. And the memory matters, because once you wake, you can carry those dream-made ideas into the waking world. A turn of phrase, a new structure, a feeling that inspires a new project. Even when the dream itself slips away, its residue remains, like a scent that clings to a sweater long after you've left the room. This is why so many people keep a notebook beside their bed, not to analyze or dissect, but to catch the impressions before they vanish. But there's something else creativity in lucid dreams can do. It can restore a sense of play. In the seriousness of adult life, the imagination is often treated as a tool, something to be used productively. But in dreams, creativity returns to its original state, spontaneous, joyful, pointless in the best way. You might spend an entire lucid dream flying through a landscape made of stardust and laughter, or building a structure that melts as you build it, or singing a song in a language you don't speak. And when you wake, you don't have to justify it. The beauty was in the experience. The art was in the moment itself. And perhaps that is what makes lucid dreams so healing for many. They offer a space where play, reflection, insight, and wonder exist side by side. A space where you are allowed to explore without goals, to experience without explanations, to create without judgment. It's a kind of internal freedom that many people rarely feel in waking life. And once tasted, it often becomes something the dreamer seeks again, not as an escape, but as a return to self, to possibility, to the part of you that remembers how to wonder. But what is it, really, that allows such lucid creativity to occur? What is happening in the brain, in the chemistry, in the consciousness? The science points to a unique neurological balance. During REM sleep, when most vivid dreams occur, The visual cortex is highly active, producing detailed imagery. The limbic system, responsible for emotion, also surges, giving dreams their often intense feeling. But in typical dreams, the prefrontal cortex, responsible for logic, planning, and self awareness, is mostly quiet. That's why most dreams feel strange, unstructured, yet emotionally charged. In lucid dreams, however, something different happens. The prefrontal cortex reactivates, but not fully, just enough to introduce metacognition, the awareness that you're aware, just enough to restore some critical thinking without disrupting the immersive flow. This partial awakening creates a hybrid brain state, both imaginative and reflective, both emotional and intentional. It's a rare mental terrain, and one that may be uniquely suited to creative thought. It's also why lucid dreams are so fragile. The moment you try too hard to analyze, the moment you become too self-conscious, the dream begins to collapse. The brain tips back into waking or slips back into unconscious dreaming. The art of lucidity lies in balance, in riding the edge between awareness and surrender, between shaping and allowing. It's a subtle state, a living state, and it teaches you not through doctrine, but through experience. So what do you do with this gift, this temporary key to a world that bends with thought? You don't have to produce anything. You don't have to solve a problem or create a masterpiece. You can simply walk through it, feel it, watch it unfold, and trust that something meaningful will stay with you. A feeling, a symbol, a way of seeing. Because that's the deepest creativity of all. Not just making new things, but seeing the old with new eyes. So tonight, if you step into a lucid dream and find yourself somewhere unexpected, a theater without a ceiling, a field that hums with music, a door that opens into light, pause for a moment. Don't rush to control it. Just walk slowly. Let the world build around you. Ask softly, what wants to be created here, and what part of me is already creating it? And when you ask that question, what wants to be created here, the dream may shift before you finish the thought. Not because it's avoiding the answer, but because the answer is already forming in the motion, in the unfolding, in the change itself. Maybe the landscape ripples. Maybe a figure appears in the distance and begins to walk toward you. Or maybe everything disappears at once and you're floating in a space without edges, without form. In that emptiness, something stirs. Not fear, not confusion, but a kind of curiosity without direction. The dream is no longer a setting. It becomes a presence, and you begin to wonder, is this just my mind, or is my mind touching something it doesn't usually know how to reach? This is where the science starts to tremble a little, not because it fails, but because its instruments are built for structure, and this place has none. Neurologically, we understand the patterns. We know that in lucid dreams, the brain's visual cortex is hyperactive. We can see the return of prefrontal coherence, the coordination between attention and emotion, the fingerprints of intentionality. But there are moments in lucidity that resist being reduced to maps and measurements. Moments when you feel as though something has stepped into the dream that didn't come from memory or imagination. Moments that don't carry information, but impression, like a dream of truth rather than a truth in a dream. Some people interpret these moments spiritually. They speak of higher selves, of guides, of collective unconscious realms. Others interpret them psychologically as encounters with deeply buried aspects of the psyche, symbols rising from forgotten corners. And some prefer no interpretation at all. They let the mystery be what it is, something that happened, something felt, something remembered. In that refusal to explain, they preserve its shape. But what if those dream encounters, the ones that feel autonomous, surprising beyond the expected logic, are something else entirely? What if they're evidence of how little we truly understand the architecture of mind? Consider this. When you speak to a dream figure in a lucid state, and they respond with thoughts you didn't consciously generate, where are those words coming from? Not from the waking mind, not from external input. They emerge from within, but not from the part of you that feels like you. They come from a deeper computational space, one that may be forming responses through associative layers beyond your access. It's easy to say it's just your brain, but when your own brain surprises you, when it behaves in ways that feel independent, creative, even confrontational, the distinction between self and system begins to blur. Are you a single narrator or a layered chorus? Is lucidity a spotlight or a portal? Are you observing your mind, or are you standing on a balcony looking down into a hall of mirrors, each one holding a fragment of the same awareness? And then there's the question of what happens when multiple people report similar dream experiences, not just similar in theme, but in specific imagery. The same staircases, the same cityscapes, the same recurring characters. Science labels these as archetypes, shared symbolic representations found across cultures. Carl Jung famously suggested that these dream figures and forms arise from the collective unconscious, a kind of inherited blueprint for meaning. Whether you agree with Jung or not, the phenomenon is difficult to ignore. Why do so many people dream of being chased, of teeth falling out, of elevators that never reach the right floor? And in lucid dreams, these archetypes sometimes respond to being noticed. You might ask the figure following you who they are. You might ask the city why it looks familiar. And sometimes the dream replies, not always in words, but sometimes in gesture, sometimes in mood. And often the reply feels tailored, as if the dream had been waiting for you to ask, is this just neural patterning, or is it a sign that consciousness, even within the dream, can be relational? These are not questions with final answers, but they are questions that lucid dreams invite us to carry, not as burdens, but as companions. They remind us that even inside our own minds, we are explorers, that awareness doesn't end at the boundary of logic. It continues into the shimmering, ambiguous terrain where meaning is not given, but discovered or created. And perhaps this is why people return to lucid dreaming again and again, not for the flying or the fantasy or the thrill of control, but for the encounter, the sense that there's more to be found in the inner world, that somewhere in the layered architecture of dreams, something waits to be seen. Not a secret, not a message, just a presence, quiet, observing, unfolding. And perhaps, too, there's a kind of humility in these experiences. You begin to see that even with lucidity, even with full awareness, you are not the sole author. You shape the dream, yes, but the dream also shapes you. You make choices, but you respond to what's presented. It's not a machine you operate. It's a relationship you enter, a dance. And in dancing, you begin to understand that power isn't the same as freedom. that sometimes the deepest insight comes not from directing, but from receiving. So if you find yourself lucid again, floating, walking, speaking to someone who shouldn't exist, but somehow does, maybe try asking a different kind of question, not one that demands answers, but one that listens. Ask the dream what it sees when it looks at you. Ask what it remembers. Ask what it's dreaming of. Then pause, wait. Let the response come not in sound, but in shape, in light, in feeling. Because sometimes the most profound thing you can do in a lucid dream is not take control, but allow the unknown to speak. And if the unknown does speak, it may not sound like a voice. It may not even sound at all. It might arrive as a shift in color, or the way the horizon leans, or how suddenly you feel as though you're being watched with kindness from nowhere in particular. You might find yourself standing in a room that seems ancient, not because of age, but because of presence, a library without books, a cathedral without walls. In these lucid spaces, a new kind of listening begins, one where there's no question, no answer, only participation. And that participation feels sacred in a way you don't quite understand, as though you've wandered into a place that was always within you, but never noticed until now. Sometimes these dreams dissolve gently. Sometimes they break like waves, and sometimes they open wider. There are dreamers who speak of shared dreams, the rare but deeply compelling experiences in which two people recall the same dream environment, the same events, the same timing. Science is skeptical, and for good reason. Dreams are deeply personal, shaped by individual minds. And yet the reports persist. Partners dreaming of the same room, friends describing the same figures, strangers meeting in sleep and remembering each other in waking. Are these coincidences? Are they the product of suggestibility and overlapping themes? Or is it possible that under certain states of consciousness, minds become subtly entangled? The idea of mutual dreaming is not new. Indigenous cultures, mystics, and even some psychologists have explored the idea that dreams are not sealed containers, but permeable fields, fields that sometimes overlap. Whether through shared emotional states, subconscious tuning, or unknown mechanisms of connection, the suggestion remains. Dreams, especially lucid ones, may not always be solitary. This is the far edge of the lucid frontier, the idea that consciousness, even while dreaming, may reach beyond the self. Not in a dramatic, cinematic way, but quietly, subtly. Two people who fall asleep thinking of each other might meet in a landscape that feels oddly familiar to both. A parent and child dreaming of the same image on the same night. A voice heard in sleep that speaks a truth the dreamer hasn't yet faced, and later finds echoed in waking conversation. These moments aren't proof of anything, but they leave a trace, and sometimes that trace is enough to shift a worldview. But science, cautious and careful, proceeds by what can be measured, and here it finds its limits. Dreams resist replication. They unfold privately, with variables impossible to control. Brainwaves can be mapped, yes. Eye movements can be tracked. But the content, the story, the meaning, the presence, lives beyond the reach of instruments. This doesn't make dreams less real. It makes them a different kind of real, subjective, felt, intimate. And this intimacy is precisely what makes them valuable. So rather than trying to prove shared dreaming, perhaps the better question is, What does it mean to feel connected in a dream? If you speak to someone in lucidity, a friend, a stranger, a figure from memory, and the experience leaves you changed, does it matter whether they were truly there? If you wake with a feeling of having been seen, accompanied, comforted, is the origin of that feeling more important than the feeling itself? Because dreams, especially lucid ones, are emotional landscapes. They don't obey geography. They respond to need, to memory, to the silent language of longing and wonder. And in those moments of clarity, when you look around and recognize that none of this is real in the usual way, yet all of it is real in the way that matters, you begin to see dreaming as more than just rest. It becomes communion, a communion with self, with the mind's endless inventiveness, a communion with the symbols that arise again and again, asking to be seen. And maybe, just maybe, a communion with something beyond. Call it the collective unconscious, call it shared attention, call it dream space. The name matters less than the experience itself, the sensation that in the silence of sleep you are not as alone as you thought. And if shared dreaming remains elusive, if the science never catches it in a net, perhaps that's because its nature is not to be caught. Perhaps it's not about proving something objective, but about honoring something subjective. The quiet resonance between inner worlds, the soft recognition that your dream holds echoes of others, the same symbols, the same fears, the same hopes dressed in different scenes. You realize we are all dreaming versions of the same questions. Who am I? What matters? What do I carry when everything else falls away? Lucid dreams become a place where you can ask these things, not with anxiety, but with reverence, not to get an answer, but to feel what it's like to truly wonder. And in that wondering, to be met, not with facts, but with reflections, not with solutions, but with presence. So if you find yourself lucid again and someone appears beside you, someone you didn't expect, someone who seems to know you, pause. Don't ask who they are. Ask why they've come. Ask what the dream is trying to show you through their presence. And then listen, not with ears, but with attention. The answer may come as a sentence, or as a feeling, or as nothing at all, except the sense that something just passed through you like wind through open curtains. And when you wake, you may not be able to explain what happened. You may try to write it down and find the words dissolving. But the sensation, the sense of connection, of vastness, of being part of something that breathes even when you sleep, will remain, and that will be enough. So let's imagine it now, the final thread of a dream that begins to thin at the edges. You're standing on a shoreline that doesn't touch any known sea. The waves roll in without sound. The sky holds no stars, and yet the darkness above you feels lit from within. You know, in the way dreamers know without needing to prove it, that your time there is almost over. The lucidity holds, but it shimmers now. The boundaries soften. The world begins to dissolve, not abruptly, but like mist warmed by the morning sun. And in this slow unraveling, you realize you're not waking up because the dream is ending. You're waking up because you've seen what you needed to see. That understanding is gentle. There's no drama to it, no final revelation or thunderous insight, just stillness, just the quiet acknowledgement that this space, this lucid world that rose up from the deep folds of sleep, has served its purpose for now. And maybe that purpose was not clarity or healing or control, but simply presence. You were there, awake inside the sleeping mind, and you were able to walk through it with eyes open. That is enough. As the dream fades, so does your ability to shape it. The colors retreat, the voices become muffled, the sensations thin like fog in a clearing forest. But your awareness lingers a little longer. You try to hold on to a detail, a sound, a phrase, the feel of the ground beneath your feet. Not because you need to remember everything, but because even one grain of the dream, carried back with care, feels like a treasure. Not a souvenir, but a thread, one that connects the waking mind with the dreaming one. You might open your eyes slowly, or you might wake with a sudden breath, as if surfacing. Either way, the silence of your room welcomes you. The ceiling looks unfamiliar for half a heartbeat, and then it doesn't. You realize you're back. And yet, part of you feels like it's still floating, just slightly above the mattress, still breathing with the rhythm of the dream. You blink and try to remember, try to write, but the words don't come in full sentences. They arrive as fragments, glowing pieces of something too large to hold. But even fragments are enough. Even a flicker of lucidity in a long night can shift the arc of a day. You carry with you a softness, a slowness, a sense that there is more happening beneath the surface of things. Maybe you walk more gently. Maybe you look at someone a little longer before speaking. Maybe you let your attention rest on a shadow, a breeze, the quiet hum of morning, and for a moment you feel as though you've never really woken up at all, as though the dream has just taken on a different form, and that, in the end, may be the most lasting effect of lucid dreaming. Not the dream itself, but the way it rewrites how you move through the waking world, how it reminds you that awareness is a choice, that presence is not given, it's made, moment by moment, thought by thought, breath by breath, and that this presence is available even when your eyes are open, especially then. Lucid dreams teach you that the mind is not a fixed room. It is a sky with shifting stars, a sea that reflects light in ways you haven't yet learned to name. They show you that what seems impossible in waking life may simply be unexplored. That control is not the highest power, attention is. And in attending to your inner world with patience and wonder, you begin to understand how to attend to the outer world as well. The door you open in a dream, the shadow you choose to follow instead of flee, the song you hear from no source at all, these become metaphors that follow you long after you leave the dream behind. They change the way you speak to yourself, the way you listen to others, the way you understand silence. And perhaps most beautifully, they remind you that your mind is not only a place of thought, but of story, of motion, of becoming. So if tonight or tomorrow, or in some quiet night weeks from now, you find yourself once more inside a lucid dream, aware but not grasping, walk slowly, touch the wall, look up, speak softly, follow the feeling, not the logic. Let the world unfold without needing to fix it. And when the time comes, let it fade. There's no need to hold on too tightly. The dream will remember you.